Good evening. My name is Fred Jackson. I am on the board of the Cal Poly Black Alumni and Friends. I am also a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, um, and they are the chapter from Cal Poly. Iota Psi is also a co-sponsor of and host of this event this evening. So I'm honored to have two distinguished alumni along with a current student. Um, the current student is Jordan Lee, and I will let him introduce himself, and then I will also introduce our two distinguished alumni, and then we'll begin our conversation.
Hi, everyone. Thank y'all for coming. My name is Jordan Lee, and I'm currently the Vice President and Treasurer for the Iota Psi chapter of Alpha Alpha Fraternity Incorporated on campus. I'm excited for y'all to definitely get a lot of information from these others. I'm excited for y'all to get a lot of information from these brothers, and really get into how to leverage yourself and get into the careers that y'all would want in the future. So, yeah.
Awesome. And then we also have Omo, who has joined us, 1974.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Yusuf Amadou, current active member of the Alpha Alpha Fraternity Incorporated chapter here at Cal Poly Pomona. And as my blind brothers just mentioned, the goal for tonight. But it's nice to meet you all and excited for the event.
Yeah. So just to go back, I don't think I came through, graduated from Cal Poly with a degree in urban planning. And after graduation, worked in the nonprofit housing development world, and then did some planning with the University of California, Merced, planner for the initial buildings on their campus, and then came back and went to grad school, got a master's in public administration. Anyway, that's 30 years ago. I graduated from Cal Poly. I'm now the assistant general manager for the Economic and Workforce Development Department for the city of Los Angeles. And so I'm honored that we also have two just very distinguished and accomplished alums, Black alums from Cal Poly. First is Michael Hughes. Let me try and get my paperwork here together. Sorry about this. Here we go. So Michael Hughes, graduate of Cal Poly Pomona with a Bachelor of Science degree in urban planning. He has approximately 36 years of professional experience as a city planner for the cities of Los Angeles and Pasadena, Atlanta, Georgia. During his professional career, he has worked in comprehensive and land use planning, zoning administration. He's managed federal grant programs, federal appropriation requests, environmental planning, and economic development. Michael currently lives in Atlanta, where he moved to in 1990 as a senior planner. And he is currently in October of 1998, he was promoted to a leadership role as director of the Office of Economic Development for Cobb County. Michael has served in this role until January 2020, when he retired and accepted his current position as executive director of the Paulding County Economic Development Incorporated and Industrial Building Authority. On May of 2021, he was appointed to the Cobb County Planning Commission as the District 4 representative, where he serves as vice chairman. As I mentioned, he lives in Georgia, Mapleton, Georgia. He is married to the beautiful, wonderful his wife, Carmen, of 31 years, and he has three adult children. So Michael is our first panelist, and then our second panelist is Professor Ellery Jones Hurd III. He is originally from Eastern Menlo Park. He holds a master's degree from Grand Canyon University in psychology with an emphasis in industrial organizational psychology. He also holds a master's degree from San Jose State University in sociology with an emphasis in sociology of education. And of course, he has a bachelor's degree from Cal Poly in sociology. For over 20 years, Elgree has worked in education in some capacity. He is a faculty member for the psychology and sociology departments at the Cedar Valley campus of Dallas College, formerly Dallas County Community College District. Eldry has served as an adjunct faculty member for Criswell College, Messenger College, Parker University, Strayer University, Tarrant County College. I think I got that right. He also has serves as a contributing reviewer for numerous psychology and sociology textbooks. Over the last 14 years, Elgree has traveled around the country, educating educators and parents about DEI and the power of culturally relevant education. He specializes in education consulting, diversity inclusion, motivational speaking, and organizational program evaluations. Elgree is pursuing his doctorate in leadership studies with a concentration in general leadership at Dallas Baptist University. He currently resides in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area of Texas, and he is married and has 4 kids. And so that is our second panelist. So I want to formally thank them again for agreeing to participate on our panel this evening. And I will turn it over to Jordan and Omo, and we'll just tag team on questions.
All right. Jordan, I'll go ahead and give you the floor as I get things set up. I'm just getting out of class, so go ahead and please take.
All right. So, to start things off, wanted to get a feel of, some more information about y'all and y'all's path during your undergrad career, during your educational career, just get a sense of where where y'all started. So and also some type of insight as to where y'all want to land as well, or where y'all wanted to land, and kind of seeing how those things panned out. So I have one question. So what are some things that you wish you would have done in general to prepare you better for life after college?
So I'll start, I guess, in terms of, let me step back and just say internships are extremely important. My parents both worked for the city of Los Angeles, so I early on had a big exposure to employment opportunities, and working in city government. And so for me, I naturally gravitated towards working in that arena, and actually originally wanted to be an architect and was very interested in going to Cal Poly and majoring in art. I quickly learned, because my dad was a senior building inspector for the city of Los Angeles, and in that role, he had an opportunity to work with a lot of architects. And some of his wise counsel for me was just be careful in that field, because during that time, things can be cyclical, things go up and down economically. And he said, just be careful about that. So that got me to thinking about whether or not that was going to be the field I wanted to go into. At the same time, my mother also worked for the city of Los Angeles for the community development, a CDBG, Community Development Block Grant Program for the city of LA. Got a chance to do an internship there and sort of opened my eyes to the field of grant programs, but also city planning. And so I did some additional research and began looking at schools, primarily in California, that offered those programs. And Cal Poly was the one that sort of rose to the top for me, along with San Luis Obispo. I was actually going to go to San Luis Obispo, but at the last minute was strongly suggested by my parents I needed to stay a little closer to home. So I ended up going to Cal Poly, which was a great decision for me. Enjoyed my time there. I would say something I wish I had done right after graduation for me was going to graduate school. Going to graduate school, deciding what I wanted to do and pursue my graduate degree. What's kind of funny now, I've come full circle in my young adult children. My last one graduating in a couple of months. That's why I'm steering him towards graduate school now. Go ahead and get it done. I have a daughter who graduated almost 2 years ago now, trying to steer her to graduate school as well, just to go ahead and get that done. That's just a minimum I think that you need to be competitive in this market, if you will. So.
Thank you.
All right, I have a different experience, different journey. I was the first in my family to go to college. So my parents, they went to community college for a little bit. My mom finished high school. And for me, I was just looking to get away. I was looking to get out of the Bay Area. So I initially had a chance to go to a private school in Oregon, play D2 basketball and do soccer, and was really excited about that. And my father wanted me to stay in California. He said, I really like you to stay in California. For me, wasn't necessarily something I wanted to do, but it was one of my mother's kind of dying wishes of, if anything happens to me, listen to your dad, listen to that. And so the reasons for staying may not have been about my best interest, but it worked out in my best interest. I had a counselor who knew some people, who was the director of admissions at the time at Cal Poly Pomona, and was talking about, hey, you should check out this school. Went to the campus, did orientation day, stayed overnight, met some people, and really had a great time. And from there, it was a great journey. I don't have a lot of regrets about my college experience at Cal Poly Pomona. I think Cal Poly Pomona is one of the most underrated public universities on the West Coast. From the cultural centers to the fact that my classes were super small, from the fact that I got to be part of documentaries, travel across the country, and meet my state and local representatives that wouldn't have happened had I gone to the private school, and wouldn't have happened had I gone to San Luis Obispo or San Diego State, other schools I was thinking about. I think one thing that I wish I would have liked to have done better would have been getting to know the area before I started school. Pomona is part of the city of Pomona, Cal Poly Pomona, but it's not. And so kind of getting the lay of the land would have been helpful, because I came from the Bay Area. So when someone says, let's go to San Bernardino, and I have because there's no Google Maps, there's no MapQuest. I'm thinking, yeah, let's go to San Bernardino, not realizing it's really far. And so that was insightful for me. But that relates to my experience. I think my experience at Cal Poly Pomona got me ready for grad school at San Jose State. And that helped transition to Texas and being able to navigate different leadership positions. But I think all the things that I value as relates to my leadership, as it relates to how I teach, it all started at Cal Poly Pomona. And so for me, I'm a big fan of students getting the most out of their experience while they're there. Cal Poly Pomona is what you make of it. And yes, you do have different barriers. You have some faculty who probably need to either be coached up or coached out. You have different administrator barriers, and then you have even barriers with your peers. But I truly believe that if you make the most of it, you start figuring out who your allies are. You start figuring out who potential mentors are, and you hit that from day one. I think despite all different hiccups you hit, you still will have a great experience. And I mean, for me, I met love of my life, my college sweetheart. We started the MPHC. We started a chapter there at Cal Poly Pomona. We did some other things, a lot of different projects together. And I think that would have happened, had I went anywhere else. And I think the intentionality behind the Black faculty and staff that are there, but while they can't do everything for you, I know that they're willing to support you if you reach out. I mean, I still talk to Dr. Humber, Dr. Barker, Dr. Nico. I still talk to these professors, even though I haven't seen some of them since 2004. I think that speaks to the commitment of the faculty and the staff there. So for me, I'm really all about taking advantage of those opportunities, because when you go somewhere else, you'll find that you had an experience at Cal Poly Pomona that you won't necessarily get anywhere else, even in the state of California.
Absolutely. I think that's amazing. And I think something that's one I should highlight is I think extremely integral is that you both come from two different backgrounds, right? One that seems to have up front, it seems to appear to have more support and direction and, opportunity for that, for you to see the foresight for what it is you're looking for and what you're supposed to be going after. And on the contrary side, having to kind of figure that out and look for that. Both paths definitely noble and definitely looking to seek for something greater. And that I think kind of plays into my next question for you both, being what are things you wish you would have done in general to better prepare you for your life after college? Seeing as at this point in time, already accomplishing your master's and then pursuing the master's, now you're both at an equivalent space, one might say. What do you think you would have better done to prepare yourself for life after college?
Maybe because I'm 20 years removed. I think part of your journey is part of your journey. And I think for me, when you start thinking about what you would have done, could have done, certain things happen which lead to certain different things happening that you don't understand the moment, but you appreciate them later. So for me, if I think of something that I would have been very prepared for, I think it was in things that didn't relate to something I would have necessarily got in a college experience, no matter where you go. So for me, I think one of those things is how to navigate difficult work scenarios. Supervisors who don't know, who have a title but may not have the competency to lead you, or who think they occupy a space of a certain leadership style, but their behaviors and their thinking mentality actually doesn't. And I think honestly, the reality is I could want that all I want to. I think it's important that while you're in college to know that you're not going to get everything that you quote unquote need while you're in college, and that's not a bad thing. I think part of life is after college is just experiencing and navigating with the skill set you got from college to try to navigate those waters. And so I think for me, one of the things I had to learn to appreciate is college didn't have to give me everything. College gave me some useful tools, and I had to figure out how to use those tools to figure out how to navigate those waters. I think for me, because I teach college, I think one of the mistakes I hear students think is they want college to give them everything they need to be successful. And there's not a college that does that, because part of this is you navigating life. Part of this is you having setbacks and learning from those setbacks. And I think because we live in a world where a lot of things are instant gratification, instant access to information, sometimes we think the college experience is supposed to give us instant solutions to anything that may come towards us. So I think one thing that I appreciate now more, being removed from that college experience, is that embrace the skills that you did have and know that those skills are enough to build upon to be able to handle other things. And not dismiss that you didn't have enough, but you did get enough. You just didn't get all you wanted, but that's going to be the case because that's life. You're not going to get everything you want.
Those are great points. I would say for my experience there, I always tell myself when I tell my kids, you're your best advocate. You've got to advocate for yourself. You got to advocate for yourself in the classroom, with your professors, grades, assignments. And when you get out in the real world, you got to advocate for yourself again, with colleagues, with supervisors, maybe with members of the public, quite honestly. And that's a skill set that you've got to continue to refine and enhance and improve, and acknowledge that you're going to need to advocate for yourself. Because if you don't, people will define you. You got to define yourself, in my opinion. I think also something I would challenge y'all to just consider for a moment. I think sometimes we get a little complacent. We get in our comfort zones, and that's what we want to do. We get in this lane and we don't want to get out. We don't want to go one side or the other. And I think it's important for us to get out of those comfort zones, to challenge ourselves, whether it's classes, whether it's, for me, I'm an introvert. So I have to work to be an extrovert. And I constantly challenge myself, speaking in front of people. Although I've got 36 years of professional experience or more, I still get a little anxious, shall we say, as it relates to speaking in front of people. But it's something that I continue to work on, even at the age of 60 years old, quite honestly. And it's lifelong learning, if you will. So I think you just need to be prepared to challenge yourself, sometimes get out of that comfort zone, and be your best advocate for yourself.
That's good. I appreciate both of your responses. I definitely see, confirmation in the chat that some of the things that you both are mentioning is definitely being experienced by people, or has been experienced by people, and, continue to be resilient. I believe it was Mr. Serco has mentioned to be extroverted when necessary, right? And defining yourself. I think that is important, and that's huge. Jordan, I'll let you go ahead and ask the next question.
Yeah, so, and I think that's definitely a good segue, and to, kind of want to figure out what were some big obstacles that y'all had to overcome in really, establishing yourselves in your career paths right now. And through that journey, like what were some times, or what was that time, and some plans for solutions, everything that you figured out along the way, to really set yourselves up in the best position possible, where y'all at right now, pretty much.
So perhaps I could replay what I just said, but I think it's important to look at yourself constructively and critically sometimes to see where those weak spots are, and accept some of those. I say accept them, but acknowledge is probably a better way to put it. Acknowledge some of those shortcomings that you may need to work on. I already talked about being an introvert. That's something that I recognize that I am, and it's something that I know that I continuously work on. Public speaking. I'm a pretty good writer, so I love to write, and it's something I continuously do as well. And again, because I'm an introvert, people sometimes, like I said, will try to define who you are, and you can't allow them to do that. So you've got to speak up. You've absolutely got to speak up for yourself. And it's something that I share with my children every day, because sometimes you take that away and it creates, I think, an internalization, stress inside you that is not healthy. It's not healthy at all. So that's something else that I think you also need to, for your spiritual needs and growth, internalizing that stuff is not good for you either as well. So that's sort of my response to that.
I appreciate what Brother Hugh said about this idea of really taking time to think about taking care of yourself. I think that's important. I think one of the things I had to learn the hard way was you really need to take sure you take care of your body, your mind, your soul, and not just what you do at work. I think sometimes you can become a slave to your occupation. You can be a slave to your career, and you can be such a slave to the point to where you neglect other obligations, whether it be marriage, relationships, parenting. And I think that's important. I think it's important to recognize that you don't have to have it all, and trying to have it all, you will end up with nothing. So, I can have all the money, but I'm going to lose something in the process. I think it's important to realize that you're not going to have everything, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's also important to you have to be courageous in your career aspirations. You can't be timid. Brother Hughes, his background started in California, but now he's in Georgia. I started off in California and now I'm in Texas. I think it's very scary to leave what you know. All I ever knew was California. So to up and move to Texas, culturally is different, weather is different, and even how you navigate networking is totally different. In Texas is, you want to meet someone, you need to sit down over a meal. If you want to make some real progress on some networking opportunities. It's very different from California. You could just have a phone conversation and be done with it. And so I think it's important to really be okay being courageous. For me, I've had two journeys of being courageous. One was leaving a perfectly good job of teaching where I grew up and moving to Texas with no job. And married and a 7-month-old. That's a very scary journey. It took some time to find work. It took some time to figure out how to navigate those waters. The other time of being courageous was quitting a job. I worked for a nonprofit and saying, you know what, I want to pursue teaching full time at a community college. And that meant taking a pay cut. That meant working and teaching somewhere between 12 and 15 classes a semester. But those things that you really want to do, they're going to require you to be out of your comfort zone. So I would encourage people, as you're in college, or even if you're just now graduating or you're considering new things, to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Be willing to be vulnerable and be willing to vocalize what you want to do, and be willing to take some time and come up with a game plan on how to do it. And if you fall short, it doesn't mean that your idea of the end goal was wrong, which meant that your path needs to be adjusted.
Definitely. I think that both of you are speaking to things that, one, I can say I experienced from personal experience, and I've thought about extensively coming up on the end of my collegiate career here at Capital Pomona. And I think that we're going in the right direction for some of the questions that I have that I'd like to propose to you. So, we're talking about self-awareness. We're talking about knowing yourself and understanding and being rigorous on your ambitions and where you want to go in life. What's your North Star when making your career decisions? What is it that you decide is the pinnacle of what allows you to decipher the hard decisions you have to make concerning your careers?
Well, I'll say for me, I'm a spiritual person. I have a spiritual relationship with my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And so that's my North Star, quite honestly. And it's one that I consult on a daily basis, quite honestly. And through meditation and prayer every day. And a scriptural verse, that's something that I value. And I take my lead, if you will, from that meditation, from my prayer, and from what my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ has given me that particular day. So that's my foundation from which I do things. I attempt to treat everybody with a little dignity and respect, and as every other situation I'm involved in as well. So those are things that are critical to me. My wife and I are both active in our church as well, active in our marriage ministry. When we had young children, we were also active in our family ministry. And so we wanted to be sure that we had our children exposed to Christ and and so forth. And I think we've done a good job of that. So I can pat myself on the back somewhat for that. But it guides my professional decisions. It certainly guides my personal decisions as well.
Similar to Brother Hughes, I think we talk about things that motivate me to figure out my North Star. I think it goes to, what aligns with my faith. For me, that's about serving the underserved, and it all ties into everything else. So for me, a verse that's tattooed on my arm is, verses is Matthew 9:9-13, talks about, Jesus came to people who are sick. So how does that relate to everything else for me? Well, if I'm supposed to help or be there for those who are sick, then that means that I need to make sure I'm looking at people who are not often looked after. And so for me, that was important for when I found someone I decided to marry, that we be in similar alignment for that. Because I'm going to share the rest of life with someone. It needs to be someone who's got a similar ideology on that. And then from there, it's what's good for my faith, what's good for my marriage, what's good for my children, what's good for my community. And those are kind of the ways that I filter on what to do next. So for me, working at a community college versus working at a four-year university, community college is open to everyone. And the ability to reach people from different stories, from different backgrounds, it's easier to do. And it allows me to do things that I do in the community, that I do with my church, that I do with Alpha Phi Alpha. And so those are the things that center. It's all about how can I be there for the underdog. And certain jobs I've had to step away because the vision of that organization was no longer focused on the underdog, or the leadership of the organization was not lined up with the organization's mission. And so those are the hard decisions that you have to be willing to make. You have to figure out what you're willing to stand up for and what you're willing to say, that's not the sort I want to fall on. And I think it's important to give yourself grace, because as you experience adulthood after college and you go into your careers, you recognize that trying to win every battle does not help you win the war as it relates to whatever you feel your North Star is. And I think it's important to give yourself grace. And sometimes you got to take some L's so that you can get the big wins that will help you achieve what you feel is important to your North Star and what's important to your purpose.
I definitely think you've highlighted, some things that I often deal with as well, when, deciding whether or not to, take on what I can take on, and what I have the capacity to do, for one, and then also what I align with, and balancing everything all at one time. I think I definitely, I think I definitely have a mindset of doing whatever needs to be done, and surrounding myself with other folks that motivate me too, in that aspect. And something that I also want to kind of go over with y'all and see where y'all land on this as well. And it's just on when I'm thinking about leadership qualities and some of the skills that y'all have actually developed over the years, and making those decisions, and making those decisions and actually navigating those type of situations. What are some leadership skills that y'all thought were probably the most difficult to develop over time?
I think the two that for me that come to mind that I would say that I had to work on, and that the first is being an active listener. I think there's verbal and then nonverbal. And just to pick up some of that nonverbal stuff, even though somebody's speaking, those nonverbal things sometimes can be stronger than what they're actually saying. You've got to be in tune to both things. So that's something over the years I really had to challenge myself with. When I'm in a meeting, talking to people, whether I'm in a public hearing and somebody from the public is talking about a particular issue, they're talking, but you've got to pay attention to some of those nonverbal things that are also going on, body language and those things. So that active listening is something I would definitely encourage anybody to really work on that skill set. And I think the other thing, just for me, it may sound strange, but just showing empathy. Just showing empathy when you were sitting down with somebody who was explaining a particular situation and showing that empathy towards them, depending on obviously whatever the situation is they're describing. I think that helps you as a leader, perhaps to help that person. Maybe that person is a person that works with you. Or somebody you may be involved with a fraternity event, or one of the things we do here is we go to a local food shelter on occasion and provide meals to people. And sometimes those folks will want to just stop and talk with you about some of the challenges they're feeling. And so I think it's important to show empathy and listen and be an active listener when you're engaging with folks. So those are two critical leadership skills that I think are important.
Some additional leadership skills that I think that are important are, one is I had to learn to seek to understand, not seek to respond. So it kind of aligns with Brother Hughes' idea of being an active listener. I think sometimes many of us are groomed into this idea that when someone says something, we got to come back quickly with a rebuttal or with a response. And when we do that, it's a real missed opportunity to really actively listen and to really have some empathy. I think empathy and active listening go hand in hand, and we're always seeking to respond. We're missing opportunity. I think as a leader, if you're trying to lead well, you have to know what your followers, where they're coming from. You have to be able to learn more about their story and understand how that story affects their day-to-day work. And it's something that I had to learn. And once I learned it, became very more effective in trying to work with different groups, whether we had conflicts or not. The other one that I think is a leadership skill that a lot of people really underestimate is the skill of being vulnerable, being transparent, but being transparent and not oversharing. So some people are transparent and they tell you their whole life story, and it has nothing to do with the task at hand. It has nothing to do with actually giving you context about what they're working on. And then on the flip side, there are people who tell you nothing about who they are. I found that when I am vulnerable with people who are working in my team and sharing and showing them a little bit more about who I am as a person, that they're more willing to not only share a little more about themselves, but they're willing to go a little farther because they see that I am a human and that I've humanized this work experience. I think you need people to know that you've had setbacks, or that you question yourself, or that sometimes you had an answer and it wasn't right and you're willing to own it. I think that level of vulnerability as a leader speaks to a level of integrity that some leaders are lacking.
Yes, I hear being amongst several different project groups and experiencing, the short amount of career growth up until this point for myself. I can definitely attest to the management style and some of the intangible skill sets that necessarily may not show up on the resume, but do add to your leadership skill set that people around you value and ultimately moves your projects forward. And so with that, considering the factors that go into those intangible skill sets and those leadership development skills, along with the life experience that, of course, is going to come with time within whatever respective field or an alternate field that may not be someone's dream job or whatever the case is, what are the literatures the last few books you've read that have helped gear you towards your professional development, and what are some of those that you would recommend to those that are listening on the call now?
So there are a couple of books that I've read over the years that have been really helpful. One, I'm sure everybody knows this book, but The 7 Habits of a Highly Effective Person by Stephen R. McCovey. Very good book. I would highly recommend that you take a look at that. There's another book. It's called Career Dreams. It's an essential workbook for finding your passion and your purpose, and it's by Susan Wilson Bullitt. And so it's something too that my kids have actually used this more than I have, but something that was on our bookshelf that I kind of pulled down, and it's something that they've used to help prepare themselves as young adults, and as they start to get into the workforce, finish up their academic careers, at least at the undergraduate level, and transition into looking at career opportunities. And it's a book that just has some basic questions about prioritizing goals and things in your life. And then lastly, one thing I'll just mention too, I read this, it's probably been about 7 or 8 years ago, but it's a great book. It's called The Purpose-Driven Life. What on Earth Am I Here For? And it's a book by Rick Warren. It's a real spiritual guide that helped me, particularly on the journey I was on a few years ago, spiritually, challenging spiritual journey, to help just sort of crystallize for me what my purpose was here in this space, in this dimension of Earth, if you will. And so I found it very helpful for me to better understand my purpose here from a spiritual standpoint.
So some other books that I think might be worthwhile checking out are Tony Dungy has a really good book called Mentor Leader, really encouraging people on how to lead in a very intentional way. I think any book that you read about servant leadership, because there's all different types of books about servant leadership, I think it's important to get more historical context about where that comes from, and then also to understand what that really means. People say servant leadership often, but they don't necessarily know what that actually means. It's a buzzword that's really trendy. So there are a lot of servant leader books. I won't give you any one particular. I would say just check them all out. A lot of them will give their credit back to Greenleaf, who talks about the idea of making sure that the person that's working under you, it becomes better in the process. There's Good to Great by Jim Collins and Great by Choice. Those are books that really challenge you to really think about how forward thinking you are. There's another book called The 5 Voices, and that talks about how you're navigating leadership and recognizing how your voice impedes or empowers other people. And I think those are books that I think are worthwhile to explore, to really understand the impact of how things work. Now, if you want to start talking about intersectionalities of different identities and things like that are like helpful books to navigate, it kind of depends on where you are, whether you're talking about caste, medical apartheid, stand from the beginning, kind of depends on what you want to do. White Fragility is a great one to look at when you're talking about workplace dynamics, because oftentimes people underestimate how white fragility and white privilege kind of infiltrate their way into work settings, and you start questioning yourself. So those would be some books I would encourage people to check out. I would also just encourage people to find books by authors who look like them, because that gives you a very different lens. And sometimes it's important to have a balance of those, because if all the authors you're reading people don't look like you, then part of your story and leadership is being missed out on.
I think that last part is super, super important. And, I think I really want to hammer that home. That's something that was told to me a little while back. And just based off some of the things that have been presented, even on campus and luckily through, the African American Student Center, some of the opportunities that students get the option or luxury really to receive from the staff and the team here, I think is something that, to hammer that home, is something that students should take away, and making sure that the literature and some of the things they consume come from people that look like them. I think that is extremely essential. But, I think that tailoring into, these books and these recommendations on growth and direction and leadership, both in the workforce and, of course, throughout in your life, right? How is it that you are able to keep that work-life balance in your pursuit of constantly improving your leadership, but then also maintaining the family dynamic and everything else outside of that?
I don't know if I can say there's such thing as a work-life balance. I thought that was a real thing, but I don't think it's. I'm speaking only for me.
Are they lying to me?
Yeah, I don't think it's a real thing, because I think it's an ebb and flows. Some parts of your season of life, you're more focused on your family. Other seasons of life, you may be more focused on your career. Sometimes you might be focused on both. And I think the danger of saying work-life balance is that if you don't have quote unquote perceived balance, you might be thinking you're doing it wrong. And I think it's important to really, for me, when I talk with people, when we talk about coaching sessions with people I'm coaching, is you need to look at your individual situation. What are your priorities? And if you're not putting time into those priorities, well, then your focus is off. I think we talk about balance, and I think it's a nice phrase. It's a real catchy slogan. But when you're navigating life in reality, some days you're just grateful that your kids went to bed on time and they got food in their belly and the kitchen's a wreck. Or sometimes you got to put in a late hours for a project or work because a deadline has to get done because someone dropped the ball. And it doesn't mean that you are necessarily going to be perceived as a bad spouse or a bad parent because you decided to focus on that particular moment. I think it's important to be real about what that looks like. So for me, as we're doing this call, my family's in North Texas. I'm here in Houston at a conference. If we're talking about work-life balance, well, then I never had balance, because it's never just all work and a balance of work and a balance of family. And so I think it's important to be great, to give yourself grace and be realistic about what that looks like for you. If your priorities are not being prioritized, then definitely reorganize yourself. But that work-life balance for me is kind of problematic.
Yeah, I don't know who came up with that phrase. That's not a real thing. Speaking for myself, my season right now is empty nester. So the kids are gone. We're coming to the end of writing checks here soon in the next couple of months. And the beauty of retiring and then going back to work again is I now have a little more time to travel. So my wife and I are taking trips to Europe, going to the Caribbean, going to Africa, hopefully in the next year or two to do that. So it's seasonal. Life and marriage, in my case, it's seasonal. It's absolutely seasonal. Fast going back, some 25 years when our kids were all young. Well, heck, as you were describing, Professor, it was just enough to get them in a bath, get them bathed, ready for bed. They got older, obviously, things change. You got food, but then you got homework to do. Then you got soccer practice, you got this practice, you got that practice. And it's a continuous thing for 20 years, let's just say, in our case. So I don't know about this life work balance thing. I don't know if I believe in that at all. I think it is a catchy phrase that somebody came up with, and that sounds great. It's a bunch of BS, excuse me. Life is seasonal and you just got to deal with it.
Definitely. I hope I can come back and tell y'all that you're lying. And I figured it out. So I just want you to know that's a life pursuit of mine.
Let me know. Let me know, brother.
Generation thing, but hey,
Let me know when you do.
All right. Hey, perfect. But I think we should definitely open the floor with the last remaining minutes that we have and kind of open it up to some of the questions that may have been posed. I know that there was a question in the chat that we missed a little while back. And I believe it, going back to, being introverted, right? Someone asked, how do you relate your followership to leadership skills, especially as an introvert?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. Professor, you have any thoughts on that? I'm not sure how I do that.
I think people underestimate and oversimplify introverts. I think people think if you're an introvert, you don't talk, that you're not engaging with people. And I think introverts, research shows introverts are typically really good leaders because they're going to listen before they speak. They're going to want to acquire information. They're going to be intentional in thought processing. And so I think if anything, introvert encourages other people who are following or people who are leading them to slow down. If that person's a good leader and they have someone, the introvert who's a follower, they're learning to slow down. They're learning to actually process and see if this is good. And I think that is a great attribute of introverts when they're celebrated and utilized in those situations.
Yeah, I would say from my perspective, I'm definitely a lot more deliberate and take my time to, let's just say, analyze a situation before I take that leap. That's just me. And I do try to listen, as I said, I try to be an active listener to what someone may be saying, not just what's coming out of their mouth, but looking at their body language as well, so that I can couch my response in a logical way, hopefully not to offend them in any manner, but to legitimately question them constructively about whatever the situation may be.
Definitely. Jordan, I believe there's another question that came in the chat concerning what are some of the things that keep you motivated in your journey?
Well, I can't speak for Brother Hughes, but based on what Wolf has said, I think our faith kind of keeps us motivated. I mean, for me, there's always going to be a need of serving people who need to be served in a way that's helpful and empowering for them. And so for me, the opportunity to, when I have those opportunities, they energize me to want to keep going. Another way that encourages me is I have 4 children. I have 2 teenagers, I have a preteen, and I have, an elementary age kid. And so for me, I want them to see how to do things. I want to be an example for them. I want to break cycles that my parents tried to break and weren't able to break, so that we can continue to move forward instead of being stagnant. And so for me, the combination of serving my community and serving my kids, I think, is that motivation, because my children are my legacy. So I can get all the awards, the accolades, but if I neglect how I've poured into my children, to me, I feel like that I dropped the mark. Doesn't mean they're going to do everything I want them to do, but if I've demonstrated and they understand those things, I feel like that's motivation for me to keep trying to do it right, even when I'm tired.
Yeah, ditto. Quite honestly, I've often thought my children are my legacy, and my efforts to try to model a good home life for them in the form of a good marriage. One of the reasons that my wife and I have been very active in our marriage ministry. I'll just say this: we've been married almost 32 years now. It'll be 32 years this May, and when we got married, and I'll speak for myself, I'm not sure I fully appreciated all of that was going to be needed to be in a successful marriage. I'll just be straight up. And so I think we early on realized, hey, we're going to need some help to keep this thing rolling. And as that happened and the snowball started rolling, we began to look at our spiritual needs, our church, and getting our children acclimated and involved. And then that also meant service, helping people not quite as fortunate as us. And the hope is, obviously, we've poured enough into our children as they go their separate ways and move on to take it even further than we have in terms of service, hopefully modeling a good marriage relationship and giving back to their communities as well.
Jordan, I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic over to you.
All right. So there's two more questions that popped into the chat. And really quick, there's more things. There's more things that we also have to cover as well. But for first question, how can you encourage allyship? And then the next question, the following question, was if anyone wanted to pursue a master's for about 2 to 3 years after graduating, what are some tips on how to go about that? And specifically, going into letters of recommendation and writing essays.
Okay. I'll try to be quick on mine. I'll let Brother Hughes finish it out. As it relates to being an ally, I think you need to figure out what you want to be an ally, who you want to be allied to. And I think that's the first thing, kind of figure out. I think sometimes in the world where we live in council culture, you want to be an ally for every group. I don't think that's going to give you the effectiveness you're desiring to seek. And I think kind of being intentional about who you're going to be an ally to and how you're going to be an ally to them. I think as it relates to graduate school, ideally, you're building those relationships while you're in undergrad. I find that a lot of folks really miss those opportunities. So if you've missed those opportunities because for whatever reason, then it's being intentional and telling people what you want, reaching out to those people that you want references for and telling them what your aspirations are, getting to, finding some time to talk with them and chat with them and get their insight about what they perceive about you. I think as it relates to your writing for those applications, be very intentional. Have a purpose. You want to go to school for what? What is the end goal? How does this get you there? Why does this specific university, specific college have what you want? Make them know that you did your homework. I think that goes a long ways. Don't be lazy. Don't be a lazy graduate student. Lazy graduate students get lazy results. So put in the work and don't be afraid to ask for help.
Well, speaking about the master's question first, I guess I would need more information. They graduated in 2020, I guess during the pandemic. Are they currently working in the field?
They most certainly did graduate in 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are they working in the field? What are they doing now? Are they working in the field in which they graduated to gain experience to go to get their master's? I'm just curious.
So they're wanting to pursue
Okay.
a master's to after graduating from their undergrad career.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I would certainly suggest that they sit down and think about, obviously, the goal. What is the goal here, and why that specific school and that specific program, and be intentional. I don't have my keys with me, but my wife gives us a word every year in January, and what my word this year was intentional. So I've got to be intentional in all that, or attempt to be intentional in all that I do. This in 2023. What was the other question? Back up. Let's see. Allyship. I tell you, I'm 60 years old. I'm learning new words here. Never even heard of the word allyship. Can somebody define that for me, please? What does that mean?
Well, an ally is someone who you are supporting, someone who may identify differently from you. You don't necessarily agree with all that that they may believe, but you want to make sure their humanity is recognized. You want to make their opportunity to speak is recognized, and so you ideally you are supporting them in ways that you're comfortable with to support them in making sure that they don't feel like they're alone in their journey.
Gotcha. That one's sort of out there for me. I'm not sure how to respond to that, so I'm not sure I can respond to that one, guys. I apologize.
And I think it's important for people who are coming out of college to recognize that you don't assume that everyone knows the terms you know.
Right.
I think you're right now in 2023, you're dealing with the similar to baby boomers in Generation X, where there was a gap. And it's important to not shame someone for not knowing. People don't know what they don't know. And instead, make sure that you're intentional about explaining the whys. If we didn't learn anything about the pandemic, we learned is that people will make their own definition. People said Black Lives Matter. People went through different directions with that.
Yep.
And when people said defund the police, people went different directions with that. And part of the problem was people assumed everyone meant the same thing. And they didn't. So I would say for those in the chat, just be mindful if you're talking to someone who's a mentor, who's a potential mentor, you may have to define some terms, not because they don't care, but just because in the industry they came in, that wasn't a thing. I teach sociology, diversity, equity, inclusion, and psychology. It's relevant for me. But for some of my other colleagues who teach like history or who teach physics, that's not something that they necessarily are involved in. I think you had one more in there.
There's a one last question. So it was mostly coming off of the pursuing your master's degree and just establishing your career path. So Christina asked, how do you know which career path and master's program you wanted to choose? And they also mentioned that they've been struggling to make a decision for a long time. So just trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily have to. I think, and I'm speaking for me, I think sometimes my younger students always think they have to have it all figured out. And sometimes you'll figure it out by learning. The other part of that is you have the resources at your university where there are tests that you can take to help you kind of figure out some things you might want to consider. And it's all about taking advantage of those. The other thing is trial and error. While you're in college, college is not simply about you focusing on your major of choice. It's testing waters. I started off as a psychology major. People change majors, they change interests because you're being exposed to different things. So it's really important to really start being, as Brother Hugh said, be intentional. Be intentional about what you think you're interested in, and know that a master's may not be something you need to pursue right away, especially if you're not sure. There's no point of doing that if you're not totally sure about it. I think a master's is great. I think an undergraduate degree is great. I think a PhD or EDD or MD are great, but they may not be for you in the season you're in. And I think it's important to be patient and to, as Brother Hugh said, be intentional, do some homework, do some research, explore some things.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is I know that there are perhaps services on campuses these days I would think would give you the opportunity to better understand what your aptitudes are, what your strengths are. And also maybe as part of that, try to identify what your passions are as well, to at least get a feel for what your interests are in terms of pursuing that master's as well. And then obviously researching the individual programs that might be the best fit for you. But I agree with the professor as well. Maybe now is not necessarily the time. Just be patient. Sometimes it's important just to be patient.
All right. Well, we are a few minutes over our time, but I want to thank, first of all, the students, Jordan Lee and Omo. I'm not going to butcher your last name, so but thank you for the questions and participating in the panel this evening. And then definitely want to thank Michael Hughes and Elrie Hurd for participating in different time zones. And so I know it's what, you're 2 or 3 hours ahead of us. And so I know it's getting a little 3, okay, in Atlanta. So, and 2 in Houston there. So thank you very much. This has been quite informative, quite enlightening, in sharing, you know, kind of your journeys and your paths and some of the obstacles, giving us recommendations and suggestions on how we can navigate our own career paths, and just life in general, you know, and not get caught up in the latest trends of work-life balance, but being intentional and being focused. And there's this book called One Thing, which I can't remember the author at the moment, but his main point was focus on that one thing you are doing at that time, right? And then shift to the next thing and focus on that. And so, again, I want to thank you all. There are a couple other future events that the Cal Poly Black Alumni and Friends chapter will be having. So I encourage everyone to look out for their emails. And with that, I will say good night and thank you very much.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.